So, hello and welcome to my maiden podcast episode. Tony McAleavey needs no introduction, but a special shout out to the lovely Spar lady who sorted me out with my strawberry jellies, my 2 jam donuts, and my protein milk. She didn't judge me for my choice of foods, despite being obviously the fitness guy who she said she followed on TikTok, but she will be tuning in. So a special shout out to her.
Well, I'm still going to judge you because no way as a coach should you be having 2 jam donuts. I don't care what sort of calories you're on. Whenever I'm eating a prawn and chicken salad with pineapple before he came back. Come on, the main thing that we were chatting about actually off air there just before we came on was the fact of how much our Instagrams have actually went cream crackers. Like, we're probably up realistically between us. If you were at 50k before, 40k, and I was at 25, and I'm at 115, and you're at 170, we're up about 200. We're up about 250,000 between us, which is absolutely
insane,
absolutely nuts. It's nuts that people want to listen to us, and we just want to thank everybody. But the main thing we were actually running over is how much we're creating versus consuming, and the fact that you don't realize how many people are actually consuming the amount of content you're putting. So you're like, how much time are people actually spending? Because when you post, you're like, yeah, it gets 10,000, 20,000 views, but you're like, you don't actually imagine it's people. I know it sounds odd. You see numbers.
I think that's actually works to your advantage in a way, because it becomes a lot less overwhelming if you view things as, I suppose, numbers as opposed to people. And sometimes you can take a step back and go, fuck, if I was to put 100,000 people into a stadium, that's a lot of fucking... I was at the Westlife concert the other day or the other night, and I was like, how many people are in this field here and in this whole stadium? It was about 40,000. It's like 40,000. It's like, imagine coming out on stage, seeing that many people there, and 3 times the size of that. Or I was like, between TikTok and fucking Instagram at this point in time, I say I'm nearly at 700,000. It's like, imagine packing 700,000 people into a stadium. It'd be absolutely surreal to sort of imagine that volume of people. But I think when you do social media for so long, you start to just think of things as numbers as opposed to people themselves. And when, like, you have a video, you judge a successful video based off of the amount of views that it's going to get. You don't imagine every single view as a person.
Yeah, and you don't realize the effect it actually has on people, because some people are like, I went out the other night for a drink for the first time, I don't know how long, in Dundalk, and somebody came up to me about 10 minutes and was like, that protein ice cream you put up was such a good shout the other day. And I was like, you sort of like, I put that up a week ago, I can't believe you. And he was like, I went out and actually got the protein for that. And you're like, that's how much of an actual difference that's made to your dad. And I was like, fair enough, it's not massive, but I was still like, I still sort of post, and I'm like, when somebody mentions it to me, I'm like, fuck, you actually watch my stuff, thank you. Because I'm like, I still imagine I'm posting it almost for no one, if that makes sense.
That's the funny thing as well. You find it hard to imagine that you're actually having a tangible impact on people's lives. And it's only when you get messages from people saying, I've lost 16 kilos from following you, you're like, holy fuck. Yeah. This stuff that I'm just churning out every day is actually having a tangible impact on people's lives. I think that's very powerful.
Yeah, plus we were sort of talking about off, like, the fact of like how much you consume that's positive versus negative, and how that can impact you, because we've noticed ourselves consuming so much before. And I think you were talking about wee bits and pieces, but we found that we were consuming quite a large amount, and it was actually having a negative impact because it wasn't following the right people. We were consuming just anything at will, and then you're not cleansing it and going through that. But we'll dive into that more as we go here, because it was quite a heavy process. But I think you had wee bits you wanted to talk about in this.
Well, that's interesting as well, because with sort of social media, obviously we're where we are trying to create content to grow our audiences, grow our businesses. But then if you fall into sort of the realm of consuming more content, and actually, interestingly enough, my screensaver on my phone, I don't know if you can see it here, I have a reminder there I need to clear. It's the more you create, the more powerful you become. The more you consume, the more powerful others become. So I have that as a backdrop on my iPhone, because I'm like, it's a very fine balance. And I think a lot of people have a lot of issues with social media, with Instagram, with TikTok. But their problem is because they're in the consumption side of things as opposed to the creating side of things. I think for us, and we're a testament to that ourselves, Sean, and anyone else who's growing on social media and then hence businesses off that, of what is possible if social media is used in the right ways. If you're showing up to create stuff and to provide value, as opposed to just logging into your Instagram, logging into your TikToks, mindlessly scrolling and mindlessly consuming content, it's a whole different ballgame.
Yeah, completely. I would have been really, really guilty of that myself, and that's why I couldn't break the habit of it, if that makes sense. And here, knock the mic over there. I couldn't break the habit of it. For me, do you know how people will say stuff like that, and then you're like, yeah, people will be listening to this right now and resonate with that and go, to be honest, yeah, that's me. And they'll try something small, do you know, like, oh, I'll not click on Instagram, or I'll do X, Y, Z, or they use an app limit.
Yep.
Right, and that's sound. For me, that none of that worked. The thing I had to do was I just had to unfollow everyone and delete Facebook off my phone.
I remember that.
See, when I unfollow people, oh my God, the death I got. People actually hung around for years were coming up to me and going to me, you unfollow me. And I was like, yeah, but I'm unfollowing everyone. I just need to clear my head. It's not personal. I'm not going to like 60 of my closest private friends. I'm actually going to 0. I was like, I'm unfollowing my mum because people are fucking acting up here. So actually I almost felt guilted out to unfollow everyone so people didn't feel preference. And I'm not going to lie, see, that was pivotal for me. See, removing everything. So see, when I right click on Instagram, I always say this to people, and this is how you know people fuck it up, because when's the last time you've seen or anybody else has seen you've caught up with everything from the last 3 days? That's all I see on Instagram 9 times out of 10 whenever I log on it. That's all it says. Most people don't know you get that because they haven't caught up, because there's so much fucking content. Because if you're following 1,000 people on half them post, 500 posts, if 200 of them are creators, 200 reels, you're never getting through it. Whereas every time I log in now, I think I'm up to like 30 or 40 now. And if you click into who I'm following, they're cooking people because I'm trying to do more recipes. So it's actually like every time I click in now, all I get is a couple of recipes and then you've caught up with everything. And for me, as soon as I see that, I'm like, right, well, that's the reason I unfollowed everyone, not to be fucking going through the explore page. And as you said, it's just balancing that. And I feel like my productivity, my happiness, my comparison, everything in my life has improved tenfold since I've done that. And it almost sounds counterproductive because I turn around to people and I'd be like, if a person's not offering you value or you're watching them too much where they're eating your time, you should probably remove them. And that sounds like I'm literally telling people unfollow me. But the thing is, if it's good for you, fucking do it. It makes perfect sense. And it's a bit different of an approach, but for me, it made such a big change in my life that I highly recommend people do that. Like, or if you're afraid to unfollow people because they're what people will say, I think muting people as they pop up is a really good way to do it.
Just gonna say it.
You don't want to offend people. Obviously, I didn't think of that because I have 2 brain cells, and I was like, oh, just don't follow everyone. No one will realize. And then when I got down to 0, people were coming up to me going, what's that about? No, and I was like, the only reason you're offended by this is if I was like, just unfollow me back. Who gives a fuck?
Yeah, mute was the way I was going. I actually went through something similar a couple of months back. I was just, and it's not even what people don't get is it's not the influencers living the dream life in fucking Marbella, in Dubai, whatever. That's not what's making you feel bad. It's everything. It's everyone.
Yeah.
If you look at just your mate or someone you went to school with, when they show up on social media, they're showing up to show something good that's going on in their life. They're not showing up of them lying on the couch, doing fuck all, being unproductive. They're showing up when they're at a match, when they're out with their friends, when they're whatever. And it's simple little things like that people don't actually pay attention to that can actually start to make you feel a little bit shit if you're not up to much at that particular point in time. So I went through a patch like that where I kind of realized that I was like, all I'm seeing on my social media is just people out. And at that time, I wasn't really going out, didn't really have much of an urge to go out, but it started to make me feel a little bit worse or feel as though I was missing out on something. So what I tried to do, and I remember walking around UL down in Limerick, I tried to mute everyone. Now, muting everyone's a bit of an ordeal if you're trying to mute 100 and something people, because you have to go in, you go onto their profile, press mute, then it pops up, do you want to mute their posts or their stories? So you click both because you don't want to see them. But it's much easier to do than just unfollowing people because then you don't have to deal with the backlash. But interestingly enough, Instagram will only allow you to mute a certain amount of people before they start to say, oh, this could be spam or something. So I got to like maybe 50 or 60 and Instagram's like, right, you can't do any more. So interestingly, they don't want you obviously muting or unfollowing people.
It blocked me for a full 7 days because I unfollowed 1,000 people in 5 hours, and I got an email support and all saying I was now a bot, so I shite myself. But it was just because I had pure done the cleanse. I was like, just remove everybody. So then I obviously got banned from Instagram for a week. So the problem was I got all the aggro during the week where I went from, say, following like 1,500 people to like 300 because it was like, these are the chosen 300. And the funniest thing was the first people I unfollowed actually were like my mum, the family, people I actually like wanted to keep. And I was left with like the complete guff. So it looked like I had fucked everybody off I liked and kept all the guff. So it was a mess. But no, it's something that's like almost, people will say it's selfish, but no way is that selfish. That's actually just like self-preserving.
Yeah.
There's a difference between them, I think. And then your energy is everything. Like, you've only got so much bandwidth. And if you're giving even 5% of that day to fucking Instagram, like seriously.
Now, there's a caveat here. We're not saying unfollow everyone. We're saying unfollow everyone except for me. So we're very good. We're nothing but beneficial to your time on Instagram. So follow everyone, unfollow everyone else.
That was literally planned. That was like me at the same time. It was like harmonized and it was beautiful. It was almost going to break into song.
I'm just going to wake up tomorrow and just be fuck all followers on Instagram. It's like, fuck.
Yeah, that's why I think people sweat that. But one really good point you touched on there is people don't bring in the lows. Obviously, it's a highlight reel, and you'll hear everyone say, "Oh, social media's a highlight reel."
I'm actually sick of hearing that.
Oh, fuck up, melts you that saying. But the thing is, what I find really beneficial is that and the problem is you can't win, because if you post all your lows, people are like, "A fucker wants attention." Do you know what I mean? If somebody posts a low point,
true.
"Oh, I'm depressed, I'm this." Some people will write and reply, and then other people will be like, "Fucker, looking at attention, feeling sorry for him." So what I actually find really beneficial to people is saying, like, when I put up the anonymous Q&A last week, right, by myself, the number one question I got asked was, I'm at a really low point in my life, or I don't know where I'm going, I'm feeling really down. And I didn't reply to it yet because I'm going to make a real good post about it. But the first thing I was thinking is, I'm not there right now, but everybody has been there at some point. And just telling people, like, I felt like that. Like, I felt fucking shit. And I probably will feel worse than that at a different stage in life. But that's why it's ups and downs. But I think it's very important to realize that, like, just because you see a highlight reel doesn't mean that it's better. But you also need to realize every single person goes through their own fucking shit, and you feel down to the ground. But I think on Instagram, it's really nice to relate that to people. Like, where I'd be like, I turn around and be like, yes, I felt like a pit after I took drugs in uni. My head was fucking minced. Like, I know exactly what it's like, or I know what it's like to be broke up with as a person. Like, I know that is absolute pants. I don't turn around and be like, yeah, like, I just hit the gym and turned into a fucking unit. Like, I felt like fucking shit for ages, and that's just part and parcel. But the thing is, I think just telling people I've went through that, that in itself is enough. Just like, you're not alone. It's going to happen again. It's no big deal. Relax, move forward. Whereas this idea of like, oh, it's a highlight reel, nobody's fucking happy. People, you're going to be happy and not, right?
This is an interesting conversation I have with my mate all the time. I think people are putting this idea of happiness on a pedestal, that if you're not happy always, that you're doing something wrong. I'm like, happiness is an emotion that you're going to feel at certain times when things are going well, that you're not going to feel at other times. And I do see people online, particularly influencers, coming on and saying how happy they are all the time. But I feel as though the actual act of trying to tell everyone how happy you are all the time in every story and every post that you do is probably reflective of a state of mind that's not the happiest in the world. And I think people are chasing this idea of happiness. I need to be happy no matter what. But as a lot of people say, there's no darkness without light. There's no sun without wind or rain or whatever it is. But you have to have these valleys in order to experience the highs. I think, what is happiness if you don't have states of sadness in between that?
I've been to say the quote. Do you ever see this is hilarious too, because I'm actually going to reference Pitbull, which is the funniest thing ever. I always use this, and he uses that exact point of it. He was getting taken the piss out of, and what he turns around and he says is, you can't have a mountain, you can't have a peak without the valley below. And he goes, that's the way life's going to be. It's going to be ups and it's going to be downs. And then immediately I remember flicking from that video, and the next one being 50 Cent, and I was like, Joe, if it wasn't for pain, joy wouldn't be so good. You can't have just peaks. Exactly. You can't be happy all the time, because then you wouldn't be happy. Yeah, you'd be mundane. You're bland. You'd be beige. You'd be beige. Do you know what I mean? Not middle ground. You're not like a vibrant color. So for me, it's one of the things where, like, when I feel down, I'm like, I feel down, and I'm gonna feel great then at some stage. But as you said, it's like, if somebody's trying to show that they're happy all the time, they're not happy. Whereas real happy people are the ones that don't need to say it or show it. They're just content. I think. Did you ever see that people saying, like, don't aim to be happy, aim to be content? And then you will get periods of pure bliss, happiness, and you get periods of shitness. But when you're aiming for happiness so much every single day, you're setting yourself up for failure. There's going to be periods where it's shite throughout the day.
I think as well as that, when you're having experience, and look, I'm very new to this in terms of my mindset sort of things there. Before I did get down the dumps, I was fucking down the dumps and wallowing in self-pity and whatever, and not really thinking too much else outside of that. I think it's really important when you're experiencing those kind of states of mind to kind of reflect on what it is that led you to the point of feeling the way that you are now, and what potentially could you do moving forward in the days and the weeks ahead to move a little bit closer to what we might call a level of happiness. For some people, you might be down the depths because of a series of habits or behaviors that you've been implementing up until that time. It may just be one of these things that just happens from time to time. But I think, let's say if it's a freak event, okay, maybe that is stimulation for you to take greater appreciation in the things that you do have, and especially in times of things going well. So I think it's really, really important not to just sit there and wallow, but kind of reflect upon what maybe you could do better to either make this experience of sadness a valuable thing, or to kind of move a little bit closer to this state of contentness or happiness.
Perception, like as you said prior, it's all perception. I went to a course before for mindset, and like a lot of people will be like, "Oh, these are airy fairy courses," and sometimes they are. But I remember going to one, and it was called "Gratitude Changes Everything," and I think it like everybody's sick of seeing the 3 things you list for you're grateful for. I feel like you've seen that much on Instagram that it's almost like diluted now. It's like, right, he's fucking listed 3 things he's grateful for. Great, well done job. That's not going to change my life. But I do feel like when you're feeling down or you're feeling off, sometimes reflecting how the situation could be worse. It's like, Joe, if you, I know this sounds terrible, but if you clip your car off another car and it's marked, just be like, well, thank fuck nobody was
I
there.
didn't smash into it.
Yeah, or I didn't smash in it and now it's wrecked, or I didn't end up in a really bad car. But if you think just the opposite and you get melted by like, oh, I'm gonna have to pay X, Y, and Z, your mindset's in the other side of that, where you're you're too irrational, Joe. You're just thinking emotionally. Whereas you just wanted me to think. The first thing I always ask myself is when shit goes wrong, I go, how could this be worse? And that immediately makes me go, thank fuck. Because the first thing I turn around and I go is, Joe, I might not have the family around me, or I might not have, like, for example, do you know whenever you do something stupid, then you're out a load of money? Like, it happens all the time, or your car breaks down, or some shit happens, and you're like, fuck me, I'm out about £1,000 here, and you're just going, fuck. The first thing I think is, imagine it was double, or imagine I didn't have that money, Joe, to even cover it. And then I think it sort of flips your perception. That's sort of the similar to the happiness thing. It's like, what way you perceive it, it's always down to that. But now that's very easy to do. But I think when you've got little techniques, like little reset things in your own thought process, and that you can then change like immediately how you view something, that's where, versus somebody turning around and you going, Instagram's a highlight reel, X, Y, and Z, they're all sayings, it's all water. Whereas you need something that you can actually go turn around and go, I can use that now. Like, listen, a gratitude list is fuck all. It might be okay in the mornings, but it's really handy if you feel like shit. Like, if you wake up in the morning, everything's hunky-dory, you're great. List it and it makes you feel better, yes. But whenever you actually need it, that's the real good time to use it. And that course was actually really good for it, because they made you do it with comparison too. They made you list, Joe, if you were jealous of somebody, they were like, list somebody you're jealous of. And then it was like, list 3 reasons you wouldn't trade your life for theirs. And you weren't allowed to stop writing until you got 3. And once you got 3, you had to get 10. Once you got 10, you had to go to 20. You had to go to 30. You had to go to 40. You had to write. And it was interesting because you had to write over the same spot. You weren't allowed to write like lines. You had to write until you couldn't see any writing apart from just black lines. And then it was the 3 reasons you were jealous, or comparing, you're jealous mainly. And then you're just block of black. Like, and the box was big, and you were sort of like, this outweighs how much I'm jealous of them so much that the scales actually balance to the side that you are like, no, fuck that, they keep that, I'm happy with my eggs. It's like, if everybody throws their problems into a basket, you take your own back out every time.
Yeah.
Every fucking time I take mine back.
I've heard that before, and I will admit it's not something I've ever thought about in those situations of how could it be worse. It's kind of like, let's say for yesterday, and we discussed it. For me, I got my hopes up about something, didn't turn out to be as good in reality as I had hoped, but I look at that as a lesson, and I kind of use it as fuel in a way to frame the actions that are going to be taken for the next couple of weeks and months. Like, right, this didn't go the way that I wanted it to. Come hell or high water over the next few weeks, come the next couple of months, I'm going to use this to my advantage. I'm going to use this to propel me forward. Even though it doesn't feel the best right now, I know that this is it's motivation for me to put myself into a better situation.
Yeah, 100%. It's just what you do with it more than anything, and it's that for me is the deciding factor too. It's like simple, like whenever I don't know about you, but if I ever have a client and they message me and go, just went through a bad breakup, like I'm like, is either going to be fucking really good or really fucking shit. It's just completely the way you take to things. Like, that's the reason I got into fitness. Like, for example, a girl I was seeing saw somebody behind my back, terrible, dirty. But anyway, I was like 14, and generally, like, way everything's pure emotional then.
Well, I've never had a girlfriend, so.
Oh, well, there you go. Well, it wasn't really like a title thing. I'm probably saying girlfriend when it wasn't really there, but it felt like it. I was 14 or 15 at the time. Anyway, let's not get into that. I'm starting to cry.
Bringing back a lot of bad memories.
All the scar tissue going on me, freaking out. But it's all what you do then. Do you know what I mean? So it's like a case of, do you buckle down, lock in, and kneel whatever you want, or do you let it sort of slowly beat you up bit by bit? And I think that's a very interesting, like, almost what makes you do that versus the other option. Like, what is it? Is it like where you're raised, your thought process, and is it what you're watching? It's probably a mixture of everything, isn't it?
Well, I think it might be ingrained in sort of past experience, in terms of if you've had predominantly negative experiences in the past, you're probably going to be more inclined to go down the unproductive route. Whereas if you've had kind of favorable experiences or whatever, you'll probably go down the more favorable response. Now, I think this overlaps really well into our coaching. So the biggest thing that we experience each week with clients is definitely coming having a shit week. ate really well Monday to Friday. Weekend was an absolute shit house of a week. Didn't do anything right. Didn't track my calories. And they're nearly there, just so engrossed in the action itself. And then we come along and offer the perspective, look, we can't go back in time to uneat those calories, to do whatever. So what can we do from this point forward? Can we wipe the slate clean? And can our actions over the next couple of weeks, can we use the experience by all means as feedback as to how you can improve for the week ahead, how you can show up and actually track, how you can show up and actually get your activity and hit your gym sessions, as opposed to just sitting there and then letting the next couple of days and the next couple of weeks go by before you actually decide to do anything about it.
Yeah, the past experience thing I think is very interesting. I don't think that's something I've never really considered, but like it's one thing that somebody asked me the other week. Like I think it was actually my mum asked me, because obviously I still live with her because I'm really successful now.
Likewise.
Yes. And I love that though. That's so good, lad. Do you know what I mean? But no, one of the past experience thing, she asked me a question of like, whenever I was talking about going away and starting a new business stuff, and she was like even asking me stuff like, are you not like thinking like, oh fuck? Because she's like, that would be my first reaction when like launching anything. And I think the more, because I leaned into fitness so much, like I don't know if you ever heard me talk about it, but at the start, the only way I worked fitness was I had the same meals 3 days whenever I was 16, 17, and I done an hour of abs in my garage, right? And it was not smart at all, stupid. But it hit it that hard that eventually it fucking worked. Do you know, if you hit something hard enough, it fucking goes in. It hit the hammer with the knee, or if you hit a nail with fucking, I don't know, your fist enough times, it'll go in eventually. So that's the worst analogy I think I've ever used.
I was thinking of something else when you were like hammering something in.
Yeah, do you know what I mean? And eventually it worked. So that's why fitness then changed everything for me. And then my past experience have always been of, if you're struggling to nail something, just keep doubling down. It's like, as you were saying to me about the content whenever I came over and I was asking you for advice about building the following and asking you for advice on my voiceovers and all. And you were giving me small tips and you're like, just spend more time on it. Just a little bit more, a little bit. And that's literally what I've done with anything else. And then I think that past experience goes into every area of your life, because you almost back yourself then, because you know, and this goes to anybody listening, like if you just work hard enough at something for long enough, like as cliche as this sounds, it always fucking pays off every single time. But the problem is, if you don't work long enough and hard enough at one or two things, that experience makes you feel like it'll not happen because you've not got the success of it. Whereas I'm like, coaching's really paying off for me now 5-6 years in. The first year or two it wasn't, but I stuck at it long enough and hard enough that it's now paying off big fold.
Well, you need to be,
flows.
What I would say there is that you need to be sure that what you're pursuing is actually a conducive path, if that makes sense, as opposed to kind of continuing to stay dialed in and still hammering home on something.
Oh, so that's complete shit.
Yeah. So I think it's important to know when what you're pursuing is productive or not.
Yeah,
or whether it's just a case of dialing down.
No, I know what you mean. Like, for example, if you're launching a business doing completely shite and double down, stick the house in it, and
that's
you end up homeless.
Yeah, just keep working hard then.
Yeah, but I sort of mean in terms of, I get what you mean, because I don't want people to run with that perception, but I like that. For me, it's one of the things where in that case of things of like the past experiences with even like the dad or whatever you're thinking, it is a case of that's sort of where your thought process comes for, with the gratitude, with the thought process of all that stuff. It comes from the prayer, which is interesting because it means like you're already shaped without realizing it. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, what creates your mindset? Like, it's such a weird.
It has to be.
It's
how you're reared.
It's how you're reared, but that's like nature v nurture. It's definitely what you consume on social media, who your friends are. Like, there's so much, and I do feel like you've got control over it all. But it's small things. It's like we 1%.
Yeah, but I don't think that just because your mindset might be a certain way now that is not malleable, that can't be changed. I think if you expose yourself to enough different scenarios, you can actually start to change how you conduct and how you respond to certain situations. And the reason that I'm convinced it's just of how much you're exposed to. One of my friends, his mother is a very, very successful businesswoman, and her mannerisms and his mannerisms are very, very similar, and they both work very, very well. I mean, in terms of how they speak and how they hold themselves, how they conduct themselves, it's very, very, it's nearly identical. So I'm convinced that is a product of him having observed his mother in business situations and then nearly absorbing that by osmosis, her actions and how she speaks and everything else. So I do think if you spend enough time around the right people who you'd like to learn from, people who you'd like to become essentially like, that you'll start to, whether you know it or not, pick up on how they speak and how they conduct themselves.
Do you think it's interesting, though, the difference between, for example, him and then somebody else that's in a similar situation and goes the exact opposite, though, and ends up like the mother works real hard, you know, she's business, she's tuned in, and they almost end up in that stage where like they don't work hard because the work's already done.
Yes.
Do you know what I mean? Like that, not entitled by any means, but like what makes the difference between him and this person here. Like, that's where the other external factors, I think, come into play, rather than nature v nurture.
He has always said since he was 12 or 13 that he was thrown into the business and he had no option in it. Like during the summers was going to be work. I think he said dressed up as an ear walking around it was an optician's company. He dressed up as an ear because they were launching ear care. So that was the very first job. And
Hopefully
then from
not
there,
my ear. Do you ever see my ears? I've got like a wee cauliflower ear.
oh, call in. I'm sure they'll sort it out.
Cut it off.
But from there, that would have then you would have been thrown into the shop floor situation. And like if you're 14, 15, you're around adults all the time, and particularly adults in business, you're not going to not pick up certain things and certain traits. And, so I think it's just a compounding snowball effect of him being exposed to those types of people and those types of environments.
You can pick them up though as well, like if you try and get in the circles. Do you know what I mean? Like we went through this on a podcast you were on me before about like you have to exchange value to sometimes get into that. Like if you're not born, you sometimes have to exchange with money to get a mentor. You have to exchange money to learn off somebody, or even give something in return for picking up a wee bit of knowledge, and then it passes on, which is very interesting. And because I think sometimes people listen to stuff like that and then they go, well, like my mum doesn't do that or X, Y, Z. But then the thing is, for example, like my mum's not a businesswoman, but she's taught me all my values, which are more important. Joe, that stood by me because then, for example, say like I have an issue in business, I usually take like a morally respectable route rather than like say for example, somebody signs on for 3 months and we agree to start date, and then they turn around to me and they message me and go, look, it doesn't suit, I have a wee bit of a mental health issue of X, Y, and Z. Look, can we kick back? I could turn around and go, no, go fuck yourself. The deposit's paid. That's 3 months coaching. Usually 9 times out of 10 or 10 times out of 10, I'll turn around and go, yeah, it's sound, no stress at all. Because it's one, not worth the aggro, but two, morally, even if that person's lying to me or telling me the truth, I'm raised in a way that value of respectability and like even just mattering, respectability is not a word, I don't think. But anyway, do you know what I mean? It's that sort of, you can pick up traits from people around you, whether they're good or bad, and it doesn't just have to be parents, it can be friends. But that's why I think like that age of like, even in school at like 18, 19, 20 in uni, like I know exactly where like loads of people I hung around in uni went. I know where I went, and I know where people in my high school, Joe, I know where certain individuals, and I'm very glad in a way that sometimes I did keep a wee bit of distance. Now there's certain people doing way better than me, there's certain people not, in terms of what you call success. But in terms of like people have fallen down and they're still taking drugs at the weekend. Do you know what I mean? Every single Saturday, it's like a bag of Coke is just it's not even an option. It's not even a thought process. It's like we're going out and they're on it. And like I'm so glad that isn't the route I stayed. And that's just I don't know whether that's fluke or whether that's rare or nature. Joe, that's what I find quite interesting, because what makes somebody pick that route?
Yeah, what made you go from, let's say, hanging around those people and engaging in those behaviors to all of a sudden going, I'm going to completely diverge off course here?
The more I analysed it, like, and the more like I went to CBT, I don't know if you've ever been to CBT, like cognitive behavioral therapy, or like I've been to therapy loads, and like whenever you get asked questions like that or a mentor asks you, you dive into loads. And to be honest, I think the thing that drove me most was an insecurity of not being good enough, which is funny because something negative
became positive.
Yeah, has made me slowly, now I don't really feel like that at all now. Do you know what I mean? I don't really get that feeling.
I hope not.
Yeah, well, never know. But it's one of the things where like that negative, I think, is actually the driving factor. And that's because, and the more I went through CBT, they were like, I was picked on loads when I was younger, like mountains. It was a nightmare. But it was one of the things where like, I think that's what drove it. And I'm so grateful that I had a shit time in school, because it's made me where I am now. Whereas I feel like I wouldn't be there if it wasn't picked on. I know that's such a weird thing, but it's like almost like it's not perception. I'm actually fucking grateful, because otherwise I wouldn't have got that inferiority complex, and I wouldn't have drove to the gym, and I wouldn't be in the position I am now, and I wouldn't be as happy as I am now. So I'm almost like, thank fuck I got picked on in school. Like, thank fuck. Which is so strange.
There's certain things I think in life that you have to wear as a chip on the shoulder to drive you forward. Experiences like that could have resulted in a very, very bleak time in your life, whereas you actually took that experience and go, do you know what? I'm going to make something. I'm going to absolutely improve my situation. I'm going to fuck those people calling me whatever they were calling you in school, and I'm going to actually go and get into great condition, be very, very successful with sort of business and things.
Yeah, it's not so interesting though, like the fact like that you're almost turning around and being like, well, thank fuck, because that, I think that relates to the thing of like where people are feeling down. Like you don't know where it's pushing you to, because people will always be like, things happen for a reason. That's all well hunky dory, but like usually when I look back at the shittest parts of my life, this is just me being straight, like being picked on at school, not feeling good enough, getting broken up with. And now I'm like, thank fuck, because I wouldn't be in the position I am now without them. So like it almost gives me goosebumps where I'm like, oh, imagine that didn't happen to me. Like, where would I be? Would I be happy? Now, fair enough, I'd probably still be fine and still be in a good position. But it's one of the things where I'm like, Oh, thank fuck. I think that's so interesting because there's probably people listening right now, they're going, that really shit thing happened to me. And then you're in a better marriage now, or you're joining a different place with a different partner, or you're not even close to your family anymore, but it's for the better without you realizing it. It's so fucking, that's deep in
I
there.
do absolutely, and whether this is getting a bit airy-fairy, but I do absolutely believe that everything does happen for a reason. But again, you can't just sit back and have things happen to you and go, someone else is in control of this. It goes, again, things happen, but they're presenting you with an opportunity to change course. Or
it's like the way you're trying to get out. I don't know if you've ever read the book, like Think and Grow Rich by Napoleon Hill. It's like a really old successful book. He interviewed like 100 successful people. It's like the very first, like, that's why he called it Think Grow Rich. It was all people like Dale Carnegie. It was people like way back. And practically what's happened is The Secret, I don't know if you've ever read it, it's literally stolen his ideas, but taking out the work ethic part in the middle, where if you just keep wishing for things, shit's going to happen.
It's like fucking manifestation.
Versus like he talks about like it's somebody that worked for like, I don't know if it's Thomas Edison or something. It's like a fucking really mad situation where like this person quit his life, moved across the country on a train to work for somebody, you know, like gave up everything and ended up being a really successful person, Joe, all this sort of stuff. It's all like where people got successful and then when they track it back, it always came down to like the leap. It always came down to like they actually made a big change, a big jump to go for it. And that was always the thing that added up. But then whenever you listen to the airy fairy stuff where it's like, if you wish for a black feather at your door, it'll appear. And then they see a black feather and they're like, oh my God, now if I wish for me being rich, I'm going to manifest, I'm going to attract it into my life with vibrations and stuff. Like, suck my balls. Like, that's not happening. Like, you need to work for it. Otherwise, it's going to do fuck all. Now, I do believe you have to actually feel for it. You have to actually believe that it's going to work and then work towards it. But that idea of like, if you just are positive that everything changes drastically, I don't actually believe that at all. Like that, it's in me to say that to like the camera there. Like if you change your mindset, lean in all of a sudden, but it's one of the things where you're like, that's not real. Like that's the sort of shit I would have believed when I'm 13, and then it fucks you over in the long run. It's like soothing you with medicine. It's like, do you know what I mean? Like giving you medicine that's like going to help you for 10 seconds.
Yeah, I think what they say is the law of attraction with action. I said you can sit in your fucking room and you can sit in your pillow and wish for everything that you've ever wanted, but if you're just going to stay sitting there, continue wishing for whatever, you're going to get fucking nowhere with it. I think I'm conflicted with it because in one sense I'm like, it's absolute bullshit. In another sense, I can see where it's coming from. But the key thing that's missing there is the action portion of that equation. I think you need to, I think there's no use in thinking that you're never going to achieve it, because if that's the case, well, then I think you definitely won't achieve anything. Yeah. But I think you need to visualize yourself living that life or going this way. And actually, the more that I reflect on it, the more that's actually kind of worked in my favor. But I've never just imagined or visualized anything. I've always visualized it and then put the steps in place that are going to move me a little bit closer to that, and not just sit there continuing to manifest and all this bullshit. And I remember actually very vividly back maybe 2 years ago, I think it was on like 7,000 followers or something, maybe even less than that. Actually, no, this is very interesting. In EY, when I was on my internship, and this is where I really got a fire under my arse to really pursue the social media stuff. I think I went over there in January with 2.2 thousand followers. And I went in for my first couple of days inside there, induction and everything else. I realized this kip is miserable. I was like, if I have to do this for the rest of my life, on the bus journey, I didn't see one person crack a smile or talk to someone on the bus journey for the whole 6 months that I was there. I said, if I have to do this, I'm probably going to die a very, very young man. So I said, I need to really start taking this social media and this PT thing seriously. So every night I got into a routine of going to work. Now, I hope my old managers aren't listening to me, but I fucked up every job that I had, that I was given inside in that place, just so that people wouldn't come back and assign me to jobs, because it was getting, you got assigned in jobs there. You're the intern. Someone needs you. Come on and do this menial task for me. So I fucked up every job. I remember even handing back spreadsheets that someone had asked me to update, and 2 weeks later, they're like, oh, have you got the spreadsheet for me? I sent them back what they had sent me 2 weeks previous. So no one bothered me for most of the time that I was in EY. But what I did do is I showed up each day, I go, right, what I want to prioritize is my social media at this point in time. So I'd come in, listen to a podcast. I think this is where I got to know like Mike Isertail and all them. I'd digest what they had just said in the podcast. I go in and make a minute-long Instagram video with that, because I had like a window of opportunity when I got home that my housemates didn't come back. So I went out the back of the house recorded into the camera and made sure to whittle it down because it was 1 minute videos on Instagram at the time. So that what I did on my lunch breaks was I'd go outside, I'd play, I think the song was Opal by Bicep, a couple of Avicii songs as well. I go on a lunch break now. The lunch break was an hour. I spent 2 hours obviously walking around outside with my big headphones on. But what I did do was visualize, and I visualized through the lens of what James Smith had done at the time, the progression that he'd seen with his social media, the life that he was at that time living. I was like, I want a piece of that. So I started walking with that music playing in my ears, imagining myself progressing towards that goal. But I didn't just imagine that. I went home then in the evening time with the new information that I'd learned. I said, if I can keep showing up each day to provide value in the form of 1 minute long videos, that I would eventually get a little bit closer to living that life. And that manifestation, should we call it, that visualization really fueled me to go and be as consistent as I was for those 6 months. I set a goal and I wrote it down on a whiteboard when I got there in January that I'd hit 5,000 followers by the time I left in June. 2 days before I left Luxembourg in June, I hit exactly 5,000 followers. So it was very, very interesting. But I didn't just imagine it. I imagined it, then used that imagination, used that visualization to fuel the actions that I was going to take.
I think that's hilarious about would you do a job to not do it. That's like whenever I was 14 and mum goes to Hoover and then you're like, you hoover really bad, and then you're
no
like,
elbow grease.
Just give me that fucking back, and you're like, right, sweet, and then never asked again. Now I'm like 30, home, never asked to hoover. But no, I know exactly what you mean, the piece of the pie thing. But I think as well, one of the interesting things is there's so many getting into this space now, especially because they're seeing how everybody's living, they're seeing the trade, and they're seeing, as we said before, the highlight. You're seeing the good side. You're not seeing where, like, for example, you've definitely seen with me where I am constantly, I'm chained to my laptop. Like I may as well have it fucking attached to my hip. And it's one of them things where people are like, he's just saying that. Trust me, I fucking am. Yeah, no. I've 2 MacBooks so that I can charge both, take them with me, and then one dies of another, which is fucking ludicrous. But I think that idea of like, I don't think you've highlighted that enough for how hard you work at the. Not only did you take the information, you visualized it, you done it day in, day out for years. Not a week, not when you felt like it, not any of that. And you'll have heard this loads. But for me, for example, like I had a challenge with people that, like recently in the mentorship, and it was like, we're going to post for 100 days straight, right? And for me, that is like piece of piss. That's straight. That's easy now. It would have been tough maybe 2 years ago. But you straight away see people drop out day 5, day 8, day 12, day 50, day 90, day 98. You're like, what? Like fucking 98? But the thing is, that highlights where you're going. That exactly is that one post is the difference. In my opinion, that sounds OCD, but for me, it's that mentality. And as much as you probably don't feel like that, or maybe you didn't, that's probably the main driving factor behind that, if that makes sense. Which is interesting.
And my mate says to me, he says, you're the most inconsistent human being in every realm of your existence, except for the fact you're just dogmatically consistent with your posting.
Yeah, 100%.
Like, that's what's gotten me to where I am now. Everything else, I'm a shit show. But when it comes to posting, that's a non-negotiable, and that's done pretty much every single day.
Which is funny, isn't it? Like, it's not fucking nuts. Like, it just makes such a difference. But it shows you, like, you dive in one area hard enough, it'll pay off, which is fucking Wipeout. But that's the thing. It's just such a like, I think that's Wipeout. Like,
I'm going to plug Sean Casey's social circle here. So, Sean, you love me for this. But what he's doing with social media and with accounts at the minute is actually unprecedented, because no longer do you actually have to show up each and every day like I did or Tony did for fucking years. But there is apparently a blueprint which works wonders for a lot of people. That's actually just, it's taken people beyond the shit show years that we would have had to put down to grow a social media. Like, you're seeing how many people going to 100,000 followers on fucking Instagram, which before, if you had 100,000 Instagram followers even 2 years ago, you were a big dick. Like,
yeah, fucking adds up. And the thing is, though, I think as well, I said the other week as well, like, I feel like it is quality of following as well as quantity. And this is what you were saying earlier about churning out following. Like, you're better being Marmite, and you build a following and then be Marmite, be yourself, and the shit will fan out. But people that like you will like you more. And then what that does is it actually splits the audience, and that's actually what you really need. And I feel like that's where you'll find a lot of people like getting followings, but then they're not engaged.
Exactly.
I mean? Like, there's fucking no point in you having 120. Like, you do, right? This is sound, right? Casey's a really good example of somebody who's capitalized on the fact that recipes help build your fucking audience. But he's got his personality in there. He's got what his views are. It's layered right, so his following do trust him.
Yep.
Versus somebody who builds a completely recipe following. has 300,000 and makes fuck all money off it, and nobody really buys anything off them. So yes, the following is there and you look great, but it's not really doing anything for you. So it's quality as well, because like, prime example, I was booked out with coaching when I had 1,800 followers. Now I have almost 118,000 followers and I'm still booked out. Do you know what I mean? Like the quality doesn't matter there. It's people still trust me because I built it right. So I feel like although people will build quicker now, and Casey's is fucking cracking for that, like we're prime examples, we're literally examples. You also need to make sure that like once you're building, it's really fucking you, because there's so many people that are just like, I'm sure you saw with any video you put up. All right, prime example, like I had that viral one with the exercise that are complete wank with the steering wheel. The amount of people that I seen replicate the exact same video, like word for word, and I'm sure you've seen this all the time. We saw it in Marbella, and that's fine because some people won't know that, but they don't know what you're really like. So like if you don't call an exercise, that's a complete waste of time. That's wank. Like that's not you. And then the thing is, that's not your audience you're actually gaining. You're gaining my audience. That's not even going to buy off you because they don't like it. It's people will hear that and be like, no, 100,000 you'll get thing. But I know people that have 150,000 that have wrote to me being like, I'm struggling to get clients. I'm struggling to get sales. I'm like, what the fuck's going on here? But realistically, the audience is built wrong.
I think virality can be both the best thing in the world for a social media account or the worst thing in the world. And that is why I've made the conscious decision, as I mentioned earlier, as to why I've tried to cleanse to the best of my ability the shit within that following. I don't want people showing up on my comment sections correcting me for not using the right terminology in certain situations, whatever. I want a bunch of fucking buzzers inside there who appreciate me for my personality and the content and value that I provide. So I've made a very conscious decision, and this is conscious, to thin
the crowd.
To thin the crowd and to decrease, I suppose, the influx of followers that I had. And look, I'd obviously we'd all prefer to keep growing our followings, but I want to make sure that any shit inside there is gone. Anyone who doesn't align with me, how I conduct myself, how I present myself, the values that I have, that they're gone, because I just have no interest in them, because they're not someone who's going to be sitting at the end of their seat looking to buy my services off me. So to me, they're a waste of time. They're just nothing more than an earache, or someone who's going to turn around and try to cancel me in a couple of weeks' time. So that's a very important thing for anyone who is lucky enough to experience virality. You can't just keep doing what got you viral, because you'll start to dilute yourself, you start to dilute your opinions. All of a sudden, no one will give a fuck about you or want to buy from your services.
Yeah, we dive down the rabbit hole of
again.
That. Yeah, it does go down. It's nice though, stuff like that though, because I feel like there is real value in it. Like we were saying earlier, like nothing really changes now that both of us had 100K. Like we're both up realistically 100,000 followers, guts of it, right? Realistically.
Both still living at home.
Yeah, do you know what I mean? Still living at home, still the same, exact same life, same attitude, same everything. But yet people will throw you on the pedestal or make do you know what I mean? It's completely like that now. Very, very interesting how perception changes of you too. You know
I've noticed that.
Have you noticed that?
Home. Like it's weird. It's like you're a commodity or something.
I got a photo in the gym yesterday that I work out in every single time, and there was two fellas like, "Can we get a photo?" And I was like, "Absolutely, that's unreal. I feel great." But at the same time, I was like, just so you're aware, like I was like, "This, like what? Like
were they seeing you all the time before?
No. To be fair, they were
Okay.
they were fine. But it was one of them things where I even noticed the way people speak. Like everybody's congratulating me. Like see the amount of people that have congratulated me about the 100K. I would say it would be more than if I got married, or more than if like there was a bigger milestone. Do you know what I mean? It's such like a pedestal moment.
It's a social status thing.
Like for example, like so my one's got me balloons for it, and so did yours, right? Like when my sister wrote to my mum about it, my mum goes, "Is it that big of a deal?" And my sister goes, "It's fucking massive." And I was like, it's not really, to be honest, but it is pedestal moment, which is quite interesting, because it's one of the things where, like, obviously we were talking about it's an anticlimax, but it's interesting because, I mean, there's not one person I bumped into outside home that hasn't congratulated me on, and I appreciate that. I think that's such a nice thing. Yeah, it's unreal. It's great because there's actually people giving you praise. You're like, fuck, I have worked fucking hard for this. Thank you very much. I don't downplay it. I don't think it's smart to downplay compliments. That's not a good sign. Nope. I've done that. I've done that all the time before, and I think it's really negative for yourself. But it's interesting how much that is looked up to, or is like an achievement versus something else, if that makes sense.
Yeah. Well, I think it's, I can't rationalize why it is the case, but I've definitely sort of noticed an uptake in attention maybe being paid to you. Or
for women?
Not yet. Ladies, my DMs are a bit bare at the minute, so sort out that problem. But I've gotten definitely way more photos, and I fucking love when someone comes up and asks for a photo. I've always said, how many people will go through their lives without any person ever coming up to them to ask, can I get a photo with you? And people are always like, I've had people saying, oh, I've been really intimidated or scared to come up and ask for a photo. I'm nearly going to be more excited than you are for the fucking photo for someone asking me. I remember one of the best ones to date was my local shop at home. Don't have to go too far from my own doorstep. But I went down and there's like, they must have been 12 or 13 year old, 3 young fellas, probably in first year of school or whatever. I saw them sniggering at the counter at me while I was waiting to go up and buy my protein milk and my jam donuts. But afterwards, when I walked outside, they go, Sean, can we get a photo? I was like, of course you can fucking have a photo. Are you joking? So the 3 of them, one of them was about to take like a selfie and he was so small. I was like, fucking, here, I'll take the selfie there. So me outside my local petrol station, crouched down with a phone, taking a selfie of like 3 young fellas behind me. It was surreal, and I was on cloud 9 going home. I thought that was just so cool.
It's so funny too because they're actually asking for you, and it makes your day, doesn't it? I know I don't know if that's an ego thing, but I think it's just more so a case of.
Don't care.
I think it is an ego thing, but the thing is, like, I know exactly what you mean because I'm like, oh, this is unreal. I'm just so like, this is how is this like? It's because it's probably like you've like if anybody knows like. You've asked somebody for a photo before. You bumped into a footballer, you bumped into somebody, and you kind of get a photo. And to be on the other end of that is such like a what the fuck? Like as we were saying there, you're like I'm just totally the coaches and trains.
A lot of people say, "Oh yeah, well it's fine now. You're not getting so many photos." But I look at someone like Rob Lipsett, and he gets inundated with photos all the time. Out. But he is still as excited as he ever was when someone new comes up and asks for a photo. That's something that I've learned an awful lot from. Is just like some people in a situation where they're getting asked for photos can be a total dick about it. Like, it's such a bane on my life for you to come up and ask for a photo. But with someone like Rob, he is ecstatic for anyone to come up and take a photo. He'll clasp your hand, ask you how you're getting on and everything. And he'll nearly ask you for the photo before you get a chance to ask for the photo. Not ask, but say, would you like a photo or whatever. So I've taken an awful lot from that. And I was like, again, it's all in how you perceive it. And for me, I'm like, what a privilege to be in a position to.
Unreal. But that's pure perception. And that's also, prime example is Rob and somebody else in similar shoes, but that doesn't take the photos. Rob's going to last longer. Exactly. Be a better business because he's actually a good fucking person versus somebody who's like egotistical, like, oh, I'm too good for that, or posy, or not the right angle. And the thing is, in the long run, what is better for you? What's better for the business? And then, do you know what I mean? It's one of the things that just makes sense, but it's also, it's so enjoyable. I don't know how people don't like that, but that shows you character. That shows you what they're really like. Versus like, don't know, see if you see me in the gym and you know I'm a bit of a wingnut lad. Like, you know I'm doing handstands, clapping my feet together. I'm like that normally. But now I'm not going to be doing it in between fucking sets. But if you turn around to me in the gym and go, bet you I can do a handstand, or I'll be like, no, wait there. And it's one of the things where like, that's me, versus you get that false perception of people and then you meet them in person, you're like, you're a fucking douche.
Very bad, as you said there, very bad decision to make is to be a dick. Because no, but if one person comes up to you and asks for a photo and you're a total knob jockey about it, that one person is probably going to go and tell, we'll say 10 people that they had a run-in with you, that you were pretty much a dick to deal with, that you were giving them a snobby answer, didn't give them a photo. So now 10 people know that you're that, or have heard that you're that type of person. Those 10 people, when you come up in conversation, might pass that off to another 10 people that you're a total knob. And all of a sudden, your public image is of someone who's a dickhead. And
it's Chinese whispers too, so you'll get worse as it goes on.
Yeah.
It'll start from like, I wouldn't take a photo of me, to five people later, he's spotting me and he slapped me. Do you know what I mean? So it's one of them.
They deserved it.
Yeah, do you know what I mean? So complete douche. But it's one of them things where I think that's quite interesting. But I never think of the repercussions of it. But that is what that's exactly like. And I always say, like, whenever you do something, like, I remember giving away my exercise library for free the first time I filmed it. Like, and fair enough, like, probably nobody really wanted it because it was in terrible shape. But there's people that have wrote to me like a year and a half later going, use that, it was so good. Can I get on for coaching? Or I sent that to my girlfriend, now she's in good shape, she feels far better about it. Just thought I'd throw you a message to let you know that it helps somebody. And people think you don't read them, and they're the messages where you go, fuck, that actually makes a big difference. And then you actually give more out. So like, I'll turn around and be like, fuck, what else can I do? Like, so during lockdown, I remember I got that exact message, and then lockdown I was like, fuck, I'm just gonna make training splits, bodyweight splits, just for people to train. Because I was like, that's all I can really do. I'm fucking no use. Unless you were in a house fire or you wanted to fucking hit biceps, I was of zero use. So I was like, that's what I'll do. And then the thing is, you're giving out more, and then it's not like you get back more, but you do in the long run. You really do. It always comes back. What goes around comes around every time, like Justin Timberlake.
So many personal trainers and people in the fitness space are like squirrels with nuts. They don't want to give out their secrets of how someone might lose fat, someone might build muscle. They think that if they conserve all of this information to themselves, which is accessible from any other social media account who does fitness, they think that if they hold all of this, that people will all of a sudden be like, oh, this guy holds all the secrets, I'm going to hire him. Doesn't work that way. And I had this conversation a couple of years ago with the PT at the time. He was like, why are you telling people how to calculate their calories? Is that not going to take away from your business when they want to coach? I said, no, if anything, it's going to get more people into my business. Going to be like, this fella has been nothing but helpful up front, giving me every bit of information that I could need for free. So it's like, what can he do in his paid services for me? And I think it's another different thing with your mindset. You're either going to be that person who's going to be pure protectionist, pure conservative over the information that you have or the education that you could potentially provide, or you're going to take the other route and over deliver and over provide value, which I think is never not going to come back in your favor.
In the long run, certain people will feel like, oh, well, he's got everything he needs from me. He's going to go to somebody else, or he's going to hire somebody else. It's usually 9 times out of 10 the exact opposite. The problem is people see this, they give information to somebody, and then this person signs on to our coach, and they think, fuck, I gave them all my information. It builds this like inferiority and insecure complex by giving out information because they see one person, but they don't realize there's been 10 people that have came on board with them or bought with them. It's like, prime example is it's the small things. It's like whenever you go into a coffee shop, if the person's a dick, you don't really go back no matter how nice the coffee is. It puts you off. Versus I go into places and the crack's good, more than likely just going to go back there even if it's an average cup. Because I'm comfortable, it adds up. It makes the difference. The small percentages always make the big difference, even with customer service or stuff like that. But I do believe the more you give people, the more it comes back in the long run. And that's definitely something I've seen, even in relationships. See, even in terms of like my family, right? One thing that they done is they leaned into me at the start. They gave me a ham of fitness, then dialed completely off because they're sick of helping me with food, which is understandable. And then the more I leaned into it, the more I got, say, better on with money, and the more I, say, pay for stuff for my family, the more they lean in and give me support in certain areas, even if I don't fucking ask for it. Like, for example, like my dad knows I'm a lunatic about food. Like, I brought meal prep down here, and like he would almost know in the fridge when I'm gonna run out. And like we might end up buying, say I'm eating kiwis for fucking breakfast or something. We'll end up with extra kiwis because he's fucking went out of his way to go get me them, which is mad because I would never expect that. Like I would be like, oh, I have to go here, get this. Wouldn't even mention it. And then come home with them and be like, fuck me, you bought them as well. And I feel like the more you give people, not just in terms of money, but actual what you're supporting them with in any area, whether it's mindset, time, care, love, it does come back to give you something.
It reminds me of something I've read before. It's like the law of reciprocity. Reciprocity? What's the word?
Oh, mate, you're talking to me. I can't speak.
Reciprocity. Reciprocity. It's like if you do something negative to someone, that person is going to be compelled to do something negative to bring back to baseline, essentially, the actions that have been taken. That's where revenge comes from. It's like, let's say if I hit Tony a punch, what's Tony going to want to do to me to level the playing field? Hit me a punch back. Same thing with sort of positive actions.
Down he goes. Sorry.
The rabbit hole.
No, I meant down on the ground.
Same thing with positive actions. If you do something positive for someone, that person is going to feel compelled to do something positive back to you. So that's where that sort of value thing comes in. If you provide so much value to someone for free, not expecting anything in return, it's like a magnet. They're nearly going to feel compelled to do something positive back to you. And let's say we're in our sphere, that's going to be hiring us for coaching.
The revenge thing's very interesting, I'm going to be honest. Like, I've never analysed why you actually feel the need to get back at somebody whenever they do something to you, which isn't right. That's such a shitty... But the thing is, it's first internal instinct. Like, for example, like if somebody says something negative to you on social media, like I got stitched working out with something negative, and I was almost like, I'm going to get them back for that. Initially, now I never did or anything. But initially, I'm like... Then I broke down, like, it's not going to do me any favours, and I moved on. But why did that come forward? Like, why does revenge come forward in people's mind? Like... Joe, like that's fucking heavy, but that's very interesting because the positive side of that is the key there.
Absolutely,
yeah, which is probably what's happened in my life without me realizing it with like the family, and then the more I give them, the more they give me, and then it actually builds me and builds business, and it almost loops. Like, for example, like I turned around mum when I came home and I goes, "How you getting on?" She was saying she was going, "Dad." I was like, absolutely, I'll give you a hammer, I'll coach you through it, no sweat. And then she was struggling to get her steps because the rain and shit wasn't last week, it was the week. And I goes to her, "Do you want treadmill?" And she was like, "Oh." like, do you know, they're expensive. I was like, do you want a treadmill? Yes or no? And she was like, yes. So I was like, right, order. There you go. Job done. And then but 2 days later, I came up with a content idea that my mum, I needed her for it. And I turned around and was like, I don't mean to annoy you. And she was like, no. She was like, of course. And she was straight away giving it more effort than she would have probably prior, which isn't bribing your, do you know what I mean? It's a case of she's actually wanting to fucking help me because it helps her as well. And it's not a case of she's helped me to help herself. It's actually a case of we're caring for each other. It's the same as any relationship, any partnership. If you look after the other person and then both of you do better, it's more inclined to lean in. It's like, for example, when me and you were trading a bit of business advice for content advice, the more you gave me, the more I was like, fuck, I need to give him something golden here because he's gave me something that's made such a big difference. And I think that's that case of like value exchange, the case of like giving and then you get back. It's something I've never really analyzed, but that does make sense.
I think it is why those who are more inclined to give more will always get more. And it's not that they're going around giving more because they want to get more. They're just going around giving more. And the nature of those actions is always it's going to create a bubble of people compelled to do right by that person or maybe keep them in mind if some opportunity or something comes up.
Yeah, if somebody's a ball bag and even if they made a really valid point, you will not share their post. You will not like their content. You will not even buy off them. Like if you don't like somebody, you don't go to that coffee shop. You don't go there. You actually have to like the individual. That's why I always say, like, if you're selling anything, Joe, even on Instagram now, it's like content, social proof that whatever it is actually does the job it does, and connection. Like that's the real key because you don't buy off somebody unless you like it. Like whenever I'm buying off a coach or I'm hiring a coach or I'm hiring anybody, I always look at the individual and that's it. Like, for example, like whenever I took my sister on to do bits and pieces of work for me versus somebody else who probably had more experience in that field of like housing and stuff, I was like, I can get you to get the skills over time. I can't teach you how to be a good person. So I'll take my sister all fucking day long because I actually trust her morals. Skills can be taught. It's hard to fucking change like behaviors. And if that makes sense.
Yeah, it's actually something that I need to consider with a videographer. So I'm looking at hiring a videographer, but I need to consider something very, very important. If someone's going to come around with me all day, not all day, every day, but I'm going to have to get on with that person. And this person might be inferior in the sense of the production quality that they could provide. But ultimately, if I'm walking around with someone, I need someone I can bounce off, someone whose sense of humor is the same as mine. Because imagine going around with a ball bag who has no personality, has no crack about him. He could be like fucking Steven Spielberg for all I care in terms of producing YouTube videos, but the quality of those videos are going to be so much worse in terms of the actual content because I'm there minding my P's and Q's and not really saying anything out of order. Whereas with someone who's filming on a fucking iPhone, but I get on absolutely great with him, same sense of humor, the video's just going to be so much better.
Yeah, turd is still a turd no matter what way you polish it.
Yeah.
So if your content is dog shit, doesn't matter how nicely edited it is, still dog shit. Do you know what I mean? Like it's one of them things. It's the same with that sort of process. It's very interesting because for me, whenever you break that down, I'd be the exact same. Like Paul films a lot of my content for me whenever I'm in the gym now. And the thing is, he's not afraid to say something. Like he'll turn to me and go,
"Dog
Joe,
shit.
yeah, that was, yeah, take that again. Like what the fuck's going on there?" And my sister will, like I get her to watch some of my content. Like for example, like, and she was like, I remember I done a video there about exercises that are wank about twisting your hands and movements. And I had something like, your fucking vibrator turns on doesn't mean you turn it all the time. And she was like, that doesn't make any fucking sense. She was like, just twist Dad's nipple so you don't have to twist nipples. And I was like, twisted his nipple. And it was funny. And it was actually a really good. And I was like, thank fuck you actually weren't afraid to say that and lean in and be, that's sort of what I'm like. She goes, it was like you were saying to me, like, you're not afraid to be yourself around them. Because that's the way I was with content. And that's the reason I probably wasn't growing. It wasn't actually me. I was like, I wanted to show, like, without realizing it, I was like, I need to show that I actually understand this. Whereas I don't need to show that I understand it because I fucking know I do. I just need to give you the information as simple as possible. Yeah, interesting. Like that's fucking mental.
I think it leads into another interesting point. I think when it comes to content as well, and it's something that I haven't, that is second nature to me at this stage. But a lot of people tend to enjoy my voiceover videos, especially sort of the day in the life ones, because there might be a few what they find to be funny quips inside there. But I'm actually not trying to be funny when it comes to those things. That I just see something and I kind of, that reminds me of something, so I throw it in there. And I'm not sure what point we're on, I'm actually forgetting, but you were mentioning something about asking your sister or something, or you playing up to...
Oh yeah, the comfortability of being around somebody. And then, for example, like my sister would not be afraid to tell me how I feel in terms of this podcast going on too long for you. You don't have the attention span.
No, my brain is starting to tap out at this stage.
Yeah, we'll call her soon. Don't worry, you're okay.
I'm after forgetting the point completely I was trying to make.
That's okay. Big T's here to cover you anyway, so you're all good. It's like BBC News anyway with this interview and the hands crossed.
With the fucking sheets of
I
paper.
was going to say, it feels like we're going to do an eating competition. Do you know what I mean?
Man versus food.
You definitely fucking win, 100%.
Easy.
Well, I'm not the big boy calories anymore. I'm on a light fry.
Actually, you're all about food volume, so maybe.
The minute, it was that, and so I'm stopping now. What weight are you now, big man?
I'm just below 103.
That's the heaviest I've ever been. And when I remember last time I was at 103 was last year this time because I was watching Love Island and I remember sitting beside my mum watching it because that's how cool I am. And she turned around to me and I literally had went to the toilet for a number 2 and came back and she was like, did the dog get out or something? She thought I went running because I was that fucking wrecked at 103. I was sweating going to the toilet and coming back. And that shows how bad things were. But you're not supposed to be 100. You're not ideally supposed to be 103 at 5'1".
No.
It's not a good look. I had no neck.
I wish I saw you, but I did see your fucking videos. You looked like a completely different specimen.
Yeah, it's more because Casey hadn't seen me in ages and he was like, holy fuck, when I came out to Marbella because I'd actually lost weight because you'll not see me for large parts because I'll be away. But do you know what? I'm going to be honest. This has been a very good podcast. See, as a first listen, if you don't like this, go fuck yourself because this has been really good. I
started off a bit shaky with the fap, no fap sort of thing. I was like, I'm going to have to caveat this to something a little bit more.
You could always cut that. That's easy trimmed.
Yeah.
Easy trimmed out. But because it got very good there very quickly. I love this because me and Mickey do this at the end of our podcast. Sometimes we always not review, but we actually talk about how that went. And I think that's such a weird topic because you're actually going, did that go good or did it not? So, and then you're not used to that. If you do like this, make sure to give them a rating.
Subscribe.
Yeah, and then sharing your story. The rating's really, really important for fighting it. So that's the one that we always rant on about because like it adds up to the list of where he sits. So like if he's got like 3 ratings and make sure to rate it 5-star, no other button works, boom. And trust me, that makes a very big difference, especially whenever you're kicking off because it helps where it categorizes and that makes a massive difference. And any shares in the story are largely approved. And if you have anything you want to go over in more detail, we are more than happy to talk in more detail. You just throw us a message now. DMs are fucking bananas. But don't be afraid to write in and go, I would love you to dive in deeper in the podcast because sometimes it's tough to get a topic. It's like fair play because that's not easy. For your first one, that's smooth. Mine was such a car crash. I'm jealous. Is there anything else you want to dive in there? Are you happy?
I think we're all good there. I don't think people are going to be willing to listen for too much longer. So as my maiden podcast, I'm actually pretty happy with how that went.
And anything you want to plug or
so
apart from the like, share?
Myself, Sean Fitzness. I don't know where I'm uploading this. I presume it's going to be YouTube. So Tony can help me out with that afterwards. So wherever it is, subscribe, follow, like. As Tony says, 5-star rating. Give Tony McAleavey a follow on Instagram and TikTok as well. I think that's enough for today's episode.
Thank you very much for listening. Have a good one.
All right.